Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm speaking with Luni, who is an artist and now she teaches music production herself. So she creates her own music and she teaches others to do so. So welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So can you just tell people about what you're doing now, maybe just briefly, and then explain how you got to where you are, a bit about your experience?
Oh, yes, of course. So now I'm an artist, and then I also teach others how to produce their own music. And I guess I didn't really wake up one day thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna be a producer." That didn't really happen. But I've always been in the music industry. I've always been singing and creating my own songs, and I worked around in the music industry in different ways. And I just felt really frustrated that I wasn't able to get the music I could really hear in my head. I wasn't able to create that myself. I was always relying on other people, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I learned it myself. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I can teach other people what I have been through, but in a quicker and more efficient way rather than taking the years of studying and trial and error and not knowing what to do, sort of make it more easy accessible for others.
Yeah, I like the fact that you kind of took your own experience and frustration in not being able to create and being an artist. So there you're helping others do the same thing. And so can you just tell us a bit about your experience in the music industry before you started this?
Yeah, sure. So, I grew up in Denmark in the classical music industry as a little choir girl. And then I moved to London when I was 20 and studied there. And then I was working for Universal for 4 years on the business side of things, sort of sorting out licensing. And if people needed music for like adverts or anything TV related, I would be sorting that out, which was super interesting being in the industry, but it wasn't creative. So I suppose the things that I learned there was really useful information, but it wasn't my life's purpose, even though it looked really glamorous on paper. Like, oh my gosh, you work for Universal, must be so exciting. And it was probably a lot more mundane than what people think. And it wasn't the right place for me.
Mm. I find that quite interesting as well, because a lot of people that I speak to say similar things when they've worked in like the corporate industry. They lose their creativity and their inspiration because they're just one of many people within that industry. And I think that's why many entrepreneurs set up their own businesses, because then they can be creative and yeah, and let that flow. So what kind of inspired you, or what do you feel like the most passionate about what you do now?
Oh, that was a good question. Do you know what? I think it's actually sharing the wins. You know, you're like, today, for example, I had two new students today, and they were both like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I get to do whatever they want to do. Like, I get to do that thing I always wanted to do, and I get to share that with them. Like, that is the best. What I really noticed today is that I used to feel like I was in competition with other people that was creating music. And now is the opposite. I feel that we're in it together and there's
Mm,
space for everyone. And that's that's probably my favorite part, to
yeah.
share that journey with some people that are sort of on a similar path to you.
Yeah, I find it so nice. I definitely feel like there's a transition that happens when you become a teacher yourself, that you find other people's work and you want to encourage them, and it inspires you as well. And it's like you're their cheerleader and you're both in it together, rather than, like you said, it being very competitive. Because I feel like in many industries in business, but especially the arts, it can be very competitive. And I think that is a shame, you know, because it does hinder the process, people's own personal process of creating. And I think that's really nice that you like the idea of collaborating with other people and teaching them. And yeah, that's really lovely.
Mm. Thank you. It feels lovely too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so what where are you now in the world?
I am in Bali, and because the reason why this room sounds really ringy is because I just moved into a new house and it's unfinished. So we're slowly getting furniture, but we're still waiting for the rest to be delivered because it's a bit of a delay. So we're like, there's a desk and a lamp. That's pretty much it in this room. But I'm in Bali.
Yeah, so do you think it's like led you, this lifestyle that you've chosen, like the remote working for yourself as an entrepreneur, has given you the freedom to live in different places remotely?
100%. I think there's definitely myths to this, like working for yourself. It's only been just over a year that I worked completely independently for myself without having an employment somewhere as well. And when people say, oh, you know, you can choose your own hours, and yes, I can. But in the beginning, I was working 24/7. And also, I was, side story, I was pregnant. So I gave birth in January this year. And when I went solo last year in September, was like, okay, I have about 5 months to until I have a baby. So I need to just work my ass off so I can set myself up in a way that I don't necessarily have to or am able to work that many hours in a day. So even though that I now get to choose my hours and I'm not working full time now, I get to choose when I work and I absolutely love my lifestyle. It wasn't easy and it still isn't easy. But it's a different heart. You have to deal with like your limiting beliefs and trusting that it's all going to work out and where is the next client's going to come from, all that stuff. It's something I never really had to do before because I knew that on the 28th of each month I would get this amount of money. It wasn't a lot, but at least I knew it was coming. So that's a different narrative, but it's a beautiful journey, and I honestly wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I feel like you had a double whammy of challenges there, because you set up your business for one, and then you got pregnant and decided to have a baby, which is a second challenge within itself. So
I
yeah.
think, do you know what? I think because it wasn't my decision to leave my job, they let me go. Fortunately, that's a long story, but so I was like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And I was already teaching at that point. So I was like, oh, I can make this my thing because I really enjoy it. I feel like there's a gap in the market for it. And it's something that it comes very natural to me. But I think things get born out of necessity, right? If you need, like, if there's a problem, if you need to have something done and there's no back door, you're going to find a way. Like, I was like, I am 4 months pregnant and I don't have a job. Nobody's going to want to hire me at this point. I need to find a way to make money whilst I'm, taking care of a baby. And I think if I had chosen, I wouldn't have done it that way. But I'm actually really happy it happened that way because it just made me not overthink things. I think we sometimes just really overthink everything we're doing because we're scared. But if you don't have a choice, you're just gonna get on with it.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes the fear stops us from actually doing it, but yeah, when you're put in that position. And I do find it interesting actually, because a lot of people that I've spoke to say similar things. They've been made redundant, they've been let go, they've had like a hard challenge or a breakdown, or something's happened in their life which has pushed them to go towards that purpose and their dreams. And it's like, even though it's not great at the time, it's definitely pushed you towards like something you really want to do. So
Absolutely. I think that's very common, and I think the universe always looks out for you. I didn't love my job. I actually wanted to leave. I just didn't have the courage to do that. So the universe was like, cool, we're gonna make a
Yeah.
reason and you're just gonna have to go.
Yeah, it's like you wished for it, but you didn't know how to action it. So then the universe took that action for you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was going to ask actually about the transition that you felt personally, maybe like emotionally, or yeah, your feelings about starting that entrepreneurship journey when you made that decision that this is what you were going to do and this is what you were passionate about. What were your initial feelings that came up? Was it like
Well, that was absolute fear.
yeah,
Like, oh my,
yeah.
and I was like, a moment like, what have I done? Like, you an absolute idiot, Luni. Like, you just like, what on earth? But then at the same time, there was this feeling in my heart. I was just like, I just feel like there's more. Like, I just feel like that this can't be it. You know, I just had this like knowing that I was just meant for more than what I was doing. And that feeling just didn't go away. And I just knew that something needed to change. I just didn't know what. So I think if anyone sits with that feeling, it's like, oh, I just feel like there must be more. There is more. Maybe just the opportunity hasn't arisen for you yet. You just have to look for it or try something out and see how it works. But you know, it's definitely a learning curve. I just threw myself in the deep end and was a beginner again. I learned a lot of things. I asked for help. I learned how to make a website, learn how to, I don't know, sell, learn how to present myself, learn how to figure out who's my client. I don't even know, how to do all those things.
That's the thing. I think there's two aspects to when you start your business. It's your own personal skills and creativity that you're going to start really working with. But then also, like you mentioned, there's the other side, which is finding your own clients and yeah, setting up a website, like all the technical things. So I guess it's a lot of investment and time as well that you have to put into that yourself.
Absolutely. I think if you do personal development, so listen to a book, audiobooks, read books, just immerse your head and your body with good things instead of thinking, oh, what can go wrong? Think what can go right? What can I learn? How can I better myself and my situation, my skills? Like I only the past maybe a few months, I've been doing consistently learning something every single day, like with intention. And it's interesting how we forget these things. It's so easy just to fall into like a pattern and a habit and not learn something new, whether it's a language, whether it's a creative skill, whether it's a business skill. It doesn't matter if you're learning and because it's like the people you're spending the most time with, the 5 people that is around you, you're going to be the 6th similar person. Same is with stuff that you're feeding your mind. What you're telling yourself, what you're feeding your head. Because if you're feeding it good stuff with people that have great stories to tell you or tips you can learn from, you're gonna be a sponge for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're a sponge for everything that is in our environment and we surround ourselves with. So it's a choice that we make, isn't it? So what
Yeah.
kind of sponge or information do we want to take in? We have to have that choice. That is it going to be positive and productive, or is it going to be the opposite to that? So I think it's definitely like a choice that you make. And yeah, and do you feel like you're still learning as well, like even though you're a teacher? Because many people I've spoken to, they say they never stop learning. So even though you're teaching other people, it's still really important to be that student as well, like teaching
All the
yourself.
time. I feel like I learn all the time. Like I just recently sat down and learned a different software, a music software, because it's different kind you can learn. I was like, oh, I feel like I really should know how to use all of them at some point. So now I'm learning the other ones, and it's really fun. And I think that will only make my teaching better if I get better. Like if
Yeah,
I'm stagnant, that means the world's moving forward. So that means I'm actually going backwards.
yeah,
And so it's important for me to keep learning and keep up on my toes. And the good thing is when you teach, it will inspire you to learn more because you're like, oh, this, you can do this. And then a student will have a question. And I'm like, oh, if I don't know the answer to that, I'm going to find out. I'm going to learn it for myself and for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think especially within your industry as well, being a musician, I guess there's a lot of new technologies that come out. So you have to constantly
Yeah.
be learning.
Oh, for sure. And I think this it can be really overwhelming. But what my ethos is that try to make it less overwhelming. I want to translate music production into be something that can be easily understood and implemented, and you don't have to have really fancy gear to start out. You don't have to, I don't know, sit 8 hours like from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and like record. And that was one of my students. He was like, oh, I don't want to spend 3 hours on putting mics on a drum kit. And I was like, you don't have to do any of that. And I think there's been a bit of, screwed view on what producing music is. And I would love to show a different way where it doesn't need to be, nerdy tech stuff.
Yeah. Do you think it's a bit of overcoming like perfectionism as well? Because I think a lot of people, when they're starting out, they feel like they have to get it perfect straight away, or they have to like do the best thing ever. Do you know what I mean? Where it doesn't have to be like that. It's like sometimes it's trial and error. So
100%. I so agree with you on that. And I think that's also social conditioning, because we're so used to this instant gratification. So if it takes over a week to learn something, that means you're bad at it. No, like
yeah.
if you think about, how many years have a person maybe been creative for, have maybe singing or writing or playing an instrument, and now you're learning a new language. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. So I think it's when we take the judgment hat off and we commit to the journey and not the outcome, that's when you enjoy it more as well.
Yeah. And like 100%. It's a process, and it's not going to come instantaneously. But I think, like you said, it's social conditioning. It's also comes down to self-worth. Like I think people sometimes feel like they have to get things perfect straight away, or before they can release it out into the world, or before they can show other people, because they're not so confident within themselves, maybe. Did you feel like you go through that with your students as well? Like you see that with them?
100%. I'm so glad you touched on this, actually, because I think most of it's actually not really the tech stuff. That's just the easily tangible things that you can learn. But I think what's actually holding people back is what they're telling themselves, what they believe about themselves. So if they don't feel worthy, or they don't feel like they can't do it, or whatever it might be, that might be like some really deep rooted that we need to dig and define what is actually the reason why you're doing this and what's holding you back. So that's definitely something I see with my student. And I notice even with myself that we all go through like a process. So we like, oh, we learned something new. Yes, it's great and exciting. And then there's like this dip where it's like, oh my God, like I've hit a wall. I have no inspiration. I don't know where I'm going next. I feel like, oh. And if you don't continue through the slump, you're never going to get through onto the other side, where you get to this like, oh yeah, I got this. And you have so much more clarity, and then you raise the bar. If you stop, so many people stop at the slump. It doesn't even need to be music, it can be anything. The gym. If you stop at that slump when it gets hard and you haven't seen results yet, and then you start over a month later, you have to do it again. Like you have to continue through the slump.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you've mentioned that. Actually, I think it's so important. Like the progression isn't simultaneous. It is cyclical. It's not linear, and you're going to have like hurdles and things to get through. Like the slump is real, and don't give up. I think that's important, not for people not to give up when at those challenges and those times where they don't feel the best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's going to get hard. Anything's going to get hard. It's not easy to learn something new, and especially if you want to have music as your career, that is not easy. That is a very tough industry in many ways.
Mm.
So it's, I heard this quote not too long ago where someone said, the only reason why some people are successful in the music industry and somebody is not is because that person sticked another day where someone else just decided that it was too difficult and quit.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I also heard a quote that's quite similar, how like success is like, there's a difference between, the difference between not successful and successful is the fact that you just give up, and that's the only thing that makes you not successful. It can be just such a small thing, you know, but it's, yeah.
I do think there's a difference between giving up and then quitting something. I think if you know that something that you're doing is not serving you, I think that's okay to say, do you know what? I think I'm done with this. I think I'm done with, I was working like for this part-time affiliate thing online, and I just kept like pushing from a place of resistance. Like, I just need to do this because I've committed, but it wasn't aligned with what I wanted in my life. So I actually took a step back from that, and that felt really good. And I allowed myself to like, oh, Loons, it's okay. You can quit this thing that doesn't bring you joy. It makes you feel stressed. Maybe it's, you know, it's okay to quit, even though I felt a bit like a failure because I sort of quote unquote gave up. But it felt so good to say, no, that's not for me right now. So I think that's also okay. It's also okay if you try and it's not for you, but at least that you tried.
Yeah. Yeah, true. And I also think it's like that gut feeling as well. Like if you feel like you're trying something and you're hitting a wall and it doesn't feel good, and you're just like, why am I doing this? And you're questioning it, then yeah, maybe it's time to try something different. But if you're doing something and then you hit a wall, but you're still like, oh no, but I really want to do this. This is like something I really want to do. Then yeah, continue on the path.
Yeah, and I think just so many people just don't really in tune with how they're actually feeling, like that gut feeling you're talking about. I think like we're just trained, like, or maybe that's just habitual patterns to just not listen. Like whether that's, you know, saying yes to things we don't really want, can't be bothered to go to. You know, we're like, yeah, I'll come out. I see my gut told me to stay home, or yes, I'll eat this thing when your body was telling you actually you shouldn't be eating this thing, or oh, yes, I'm gonna go on a date with this person, but your gut feeling was like there's a red flag, and you still went ahead and did it. Like, I think if we listen more to what our gut's telling us, no, I've never heard a person say, I wish I didn't listen to my gut. It's always the other way around, isn't it? It's always like, oh, I wish I'd listened to my gut because now X has happened.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, even with you quitting your job and making that transition, you knew deep down inside, listening to your gut, that you wasn't feeling right there, and you wanted to pursue something new. So
yeah, and it's so much more rewarding. Like, even, you know, now I have a baby, and knowing that I've been following my dreams, I feel I feel more authentic rather than sort of I would encourage her when she grows up to like, you should follow your dreams and take a leap of faith. But I've been sitting there not doing it. Like that's like, you know, I can't be a coward like that. I want to be I want to lead by example and show her that whatever she wants to do in life, she can do that if she put her minds to it.
yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that it's transitioning onto your next generation as well.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so. What would you, if someone was starting out in the music industry, what kind of top advice would you give them?
Okay, so this advice, it doesn't actually matter if you are creative in the industry, if you're like on the business side, whatever. I would say be really clear, first of all, why you're doing this. Because if people say, I just want to make it in the industry, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? There's so many ways you can be, quote unquote, make it. or be successful, what does it mean to you? Because if you know deep down what it means to you, doesn't matter what anyone else says. This is a tough industry. People are going to judge you for whatever you say or do or don't do.
Mm,
So, you have to be very crystal clear on that. And then what's your mission? What is
mm,
your mission? It has to be deeper than just, oh, I want a lot of Spotify streams. No,
yes.
what's the
Yeah.
mission?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that also comes down to cultural conditioning as well, in a way, because are you doing just something for the fame and the gratification, instant gratification, or are you doing it because it's like coming from your soul? It's like, I think that's so important, and especially in the music industry, because it is renowned for being like a really tough, hard industry. And I think you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have people that say no to you probably many times. And if you're not doing it for the right reasons, you're doing it for your soul, and then you're gonna probably give up, and you're not always going to hear what you want to hear from people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also think if you go in with a mind of like, oh, I know I'm going to get lots of people say no to me. If you just know that that's a part of the process, you're not gonna attach yourself to that. I think if you come from a place of this is just a part of that journey, and I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. I'm just gonna say thank you for your feedback and move on. Where if you then sort of, oh, they don't like me because they don't like my art or whatever, they don't like what I have to offer, even if it doesn't even need to be for music industry. That's okay. That's a part of the process. We only see other people's iceberg, but there is so much underneath, so many rejections and do it again, and setbacks and all the stuff. We only see the highlights of other people. So we
Yeah.
have to remember that you will only see the highlights, but you didn't see the work that was going on underneath, and there is always more work done underneath.
Yes, 100%. That's so important to remember. I think especially in popular culture as well, everything seems glamorous, and like, you only look at the highlights like you mentioned, and you only know about people's real stories unless you watch a documentary or read their book or something like that. And then you think, wow, this person has been through a lot to get where they are now. Like, yeah.
I think I really agree with you. And I think something that I had to learn was I've definitely been a bit of a perfectionist and didn't want to show like my vulnerable side. I didn't want to, oh no, people can't see if there's something I don't know or if there's something I feel insecure about, because I felt like, I don't know, it wasn't good enough. And it's only in the past maybe 6 months I've actually shared a bit more about my story, a bit more about the things that I struggle with. And it's interesting how I thought people were gonna like stop following me or like not like what I put out, but actually it's been the opposite. I've had a lot more genuine conversations with people, and that feels nice.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's lovely. I think it's so nice when people can relate to another person as well, because it seems more genuine.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like my favorite quote, or like one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown. She says about vulnerability. When we see vulnerability in other people, if they share openly, we see strength. I see strength in that person because they shared really openly how they were feeling. But if I share vulnerably for myself, I see that as a weakness. So it's
Mm,
interesting how we would see the strength in others, but weakness in myself. So if anyone out there
mm.
are listening, I think go download Brene Brown's book because epic.
Yeah, but I think as well, the reason we see vulnerability as a weakness is because it's hard to be vulnerable. We have to break down all our walls to be vulnerable. And yeah, all these things that we've put up or been told to put up our whole lives. And I think if you have the courage, because it does take courage to be vulnerable, if you have the courage to be vulnerable, then other people see that in you. And it's not necessarily the vulnerability, but I think it's the courage behind the vulnerability.
I love that. I agree with you on that.
Oh, thank you for joining me today, Luni. So if people want to get in contact with you, how would they find you?
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like time's gone really quick. No, it's probably best on Instagram, actually. That's where I hang out, and you can find me at just.luni, and Luni spelled like the moon with an I, so Luni. So that's at just Luni, and come say hi.
I was going to mention earlier as well how I love the fact that we were talking about being creative was quite very cyclical, and it reminded me of the phases of the moon, you know, like sometimes you're like full and then sometimes you feel empty. So I really love your name because it kind of relates to what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think there's definitely seasons to creativity, right? It's or seasons to life is sort of implementing that, and yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.